Good morning, coaches. Welcome to one more learning engagement brought to you by the ICF Mumbai chapter. My name is Abhilasha Jha and I'm your host for the morning. I'm a leadership and life coach, an HR professional, and an entrepreneur with over 19 years of experience, and it is my absolute privilege to be here today. My co-host for the morning is Neha Jalan. She is a leadership coach and HR and communication professional with over 17 years of experience with Economic Times and Times of India Group. So, today's topic is the journey to discovering your purpose. When life goes through turbulent times, such as what we're all going through right now, our life purpose and core values can provide us with the necessary anchor and guidance. Yet, do we know what our true purpose is? We often spend a lifetime in search of our life's calling. Our speakers, Jonathan Gustin and Niharika Sanyal, will be our purpose guide in today's session. Let me tell you a little bit about our speakers today. Jonathan, he is a purpose guide, psychotherapist, meditation teacher, and integral mentor in private practice in the San Francisco Bay Area for over 20 years. He is the founder and lead teacher of the Purpose Guides Institute, Integral Awakening Center, and Green Sangha. He is a contributing author to the book anthology Purpose Rising. Jonathan teaches at John F. Kennedy University and has taught at the California Institute of Integral Studies, Kaiser Permanente, Green Gulden Center, and several other institutes. When he was 16 years, he read his first Raman Maharshi book. And then at 19, he came to India for a month with his 18-year-old girlfriend in tow, seeking enlightened beings. So focused he was on meeting a living Ramana Maharshi that when he passed Agra on a train, he didn't even take a minute to take in the beauty of the Taj Mahal. But because of his focus, he did get to meet the last living disciple of Ma Sharda Devi. Niharika is a trained in purpose work from Purpose Guides Institute and Viktor Frankl Institute of Logotherapy. She has an MA in Human Development and Psychology from Harvard University and a PG Diploma in Counseling and Guidance. Formerly an architect, she has taught young people in talent development programs. She now works as a purpose guide and youth leadership coach in India with an aim to launch transformational leadership programs that empower young people to develop purpose, empathy, and self-awareness. A fun fact about Niharika, she once got accosted by police for trying to sneak into prison territory in India, desperate to do research on the prison conditions there. You could say she's always had a fascination for the shadow side of humanity. So on that note, let's turn to our speakers for today. Over to you, Jonathan and Niharika.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for having me here at ICF Mumbai. Wonderful to be here with you. I have a request, and all of my requests are completely optional. But I see that most of you have your video turned off, and maybe there's excellent reasons for that. I would love to see you rather than talk to a little pictures and images. Yeah, that's my request. I think you may have a better experience. And also there's a collective field that is more palpable and more psychoactive when we can see each other. And it facilitates our full attention. Speaking of which, if you have other tabs open or your phone or this or that, if at all possible, I invite you to clear that away and really give your full attention to our gathering here today. I know that let's see, where is it? Is it on here? In the chat, if you haven't already noticed, Uchal, by the way, I will probably mispronounce names horribly. It's okay to laugh at me, but there it is. So there's a Google Doc that was sent to you. It's in your email box, and it's also in a link in the Zoom group chat. So you might want to take a look at that I may use the slides. Okay, so that's enough of the intro, and thank you for turning on your video. I really appreciate it. So we'll just do a 2-3 minute meditation. It'll be guided. So here we go. If you like, you can close your eyes. So here you are on a Sunday morning, utterly unique. Common elements from yesterday and the day before. But what's unique is that we are gathering together to explore the notion of purpose, of soul level purpose. "56 human expressions of soul inquiring together as a group, a we space, a field of inquiry. What is human purpose? What is purpose at all?" So let this question occupy you. There's many other questions and concerns, for sure. How are we going to get through the pandemic? How are we going to pay the next bill? How are we going to negotiate parenthood or being married or being single or ill and all the rest? But from time to time, you have had a little space and you've asked the question, what is this life for? What if my basic needs were met? Then what? So let this question of purpose fill you from the soles of your feet to the very top of your head. Is there anything subtle or physical that I would discover that I am meant to be totally devoted to? Does purpose even exist? And if it does, how does one discover it? So I'll just be quiet for a moment. Just let the stillness and silence receive the intensity, the poignancy, the passion of your question. How do I live this one wild, precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver put it? Okay. There are many reasons why I start with a meditation, but the first is I'm not a coach. I'm a purpose guide, a meditation teacher, a psychotherapist. But what I've learned is that presence, whether I'm meditating, whether I am guiding someone to soul, whether I am doing instruction around meditation, the presence, full presence, is the prerequisite. And this is true, of course, in coaching. Can we bring all of ourselves to this person that's in front of us, or in the pandemic on the Zoom screen, or whatever it may be? And of course, it's not just about being present, it's like, how much of us have we metabolized? How much of us have we embodied, inhabited? So I'm going to present to you a cosmology, which means it's a good story, but it's not actually true, but it points to something. And so I will call this cosmology the three worlds. Purpose guiding, to me, is a pan-cultural phenomenon, right? Like way before any history, you know, shamans and indigenous cultures, you know, were expounding on this, right? All the way to now, here in North America, the modern vision fast, sometimes called the vision quest. I receive nourishment from so many traditions. You can see I have a purpose altar here. I'm not going to go through all the people here, but just to point out that this doesn't belong to one culture, one time, and one place. But just here are a few. At the top here, I don't know if you can see, yeah, you probably can't tell. Anyway, that's Arjuna and Krishna here, Socrates here, Sujawardi, a Sufi, Ibn Arabi, another Sufi, and on and on. That is to say that there's a kernel in our spiritual traditions, right? If you're a Sikh or Jewish or Christian or whatever it is, this question of what is my life meant for, the great sages and masters and all the traditions have spoken to this. And so my cosmology is deeply informed by the Native American traditions here on this continent, North America, Sufism, very much so, Hinduism, and on and on. Okay, so the three worlds. Maybe I will put up I think I will put up a slide. Let me see if I can get it quickly. Oh, I want to say Niharika is my co-teacher today. I have a tendency to kind of get impassioned and just go on and on. And so at any time, I just want you to know, if she interrupts me, it's not like she's interrupting me. I specifically told her 3 times, please interrupt, add. And also we're not, you know, one body with 2 heads. She has her own understanding of purpose guiding. And so I would actually love it if we had a little back and forth. So, so I just made this today for you. So 3 worlds, 1 life. So here's the shorthand. If I had to say it in a moment. The purpose of life is to wake up, grow up, and show up. That's the shortest possible answer. And I'll make it 30 seconds long. The purpose of life is to wake up to classical enlightenment, the enlightenment that is associated sometimes with the Buddha or Ramana Maharshi or whomever it is that you, the prophet, you know, whomever it is that you deeply respect in that way. So the purpose of life is to wake up to the undivided, the unbounded enlightenment, to grow up into an emotional adult. I'll just say 1 minute's worth of that. To give and receive love without any unnecessary impediment is so difficult. We want to be loved so much, and yet we get in our own way. When it actually is directed at us, sometimes we do this like kind of duck, bob, and weave. Another part of being an emotional adult is to not sell our equanimity out too cheaply. Now, there are some things that are worth selling your equanimity. I have an 11-year-old son. If he were sick, I wouldn't just probably be perfectly equanimous, nor would I want to be honestly. But you know, if someone slights me or someone argues with me on Facebook, or you know, it's not worth it, right? So that's another one. And then the last one is that I want to share is that joy tolerance, right? So in the United States, we have this elite armed force called the Navy SEALs. They have what we would call high pain threshold, high pain tolerance, right? If you're doing the Tour de France or you're doing any number of things, you need to be very tough. Well, so here's a question. How much joy can we tolerate? And it sounds like, well, I'll tolerate quite a bit of joy. But interestingly, once again, there are antibodies to actually experiencing joy. Were we to develop those 3 lines of emotional intelligence, and then we would have what we might call emotional adulthood.
Sydney, can this be cut into 2, please?
Can you say that again, please?
I suppose that was not for you, Jonathan.
Okay, all right. All right, so now the third purpose, right? So we've got 3 worlds of purpose. There's really just one life. This is a superimposition, right? So, you know, keep that in mind. The third one is to show up with abandon with your soul level purpose. What does that mean? It's like a descent. So if you imagine that your everyday life, most of it is spent in, what should we call it? Just your everyday personality and ego going, you know, I don't need to really describe what an everyday personality and ego is like. We're familiar with it. But it's possible to transcend that skin encapsulated identity. And the upper world feels like sometimes the way sort of nirvana or any number, heaven or any number of words, it feels like we experience this unitive intimacy, this undivided, this unbounded state. When you experience it and I experience it, we're experiencing the same thing through the same eyes of the great mystery itself. And you can translate the great mystery into theological language, if that resonates with you. If you're more of an atheist, then mystery will work, you know, whatever fits for you. So the other spiritual journey is the descent. So if you imagine that classical or traditional enlightenment feels like an ascent, an up and out, obviously in the end it's not up and it's not out, but nonetheless, then think of soul purpose awakening as a descent, a burrowing down into your depths where you discover what is spiritually unique to you. So there's something, we all live in a different town and a different house, and we have different hair and different eyes and so forth. So there's uniqueness at the level of personality, right? You know, I like to eat what I like to eat, you like to eat what you like to eat. But there's uniqueness in spirit as well. Sometimes it's thought that spirit is just the great, undifferentiated, unborn, limitless, timeless being awareness. Yes, but as it manifests in a human being, it shows up uniquely. So let me give you an example. When I was younger, I was 20, and I was I'm Canadian. I was in northerly end of my province of Ontario doing a little meditation retreat. And it was an upper world retreat. I was very interested in classical enlightenment. But between meditations, there was, you know, I was lying on the couch in the cabin, and I was contemplating my life because I wanted to know, well, what am I going to do? I was going to graduate college, university soon. And, you know, practically, what am I going to do? But also, like, what am I going to do with this life? And I had what I now call a vision. But here's what actually just happened. Is I saw a picture and I heard words. And the words were, and I'd never heard this phrase before, whole person midwifery. Whole person midwifery. And I could see a figure, which was sort of me, and then the body of a human being. And they were, and this is difficult because it's a mystical experience, but I'll try. It was the image of someone giving birth to their wholeness, going from a fractional identity to the fullness, the full blossoming, the full flowering of what and who they are. And I knew I wasn't going to catch babies. It wasn't being a traditional midwife. That wasn't what it was about. And I knew it would take me decades to study to become a whole person midwife. So interestingly, on my business card, it doesn't say that because that sounds crazy. That's an interior vision. But that's what animates and drives me. All right, I should finish up on this piece. and get to Niharika, or some questions actually. So I imagine there's a whole variety of people here. Some of you may come from Hindu tradition. You may be able to run circles around me in terms of understanding these things. And I get the irony of a Jewish Canadian daring to even use these words. But I think it's important because amongst you, I'm imagining there will be some people who are just sort of nominally Hindu. Hasn't been really a very, soaked in that rich spiritual tradition, and that's fine. So, so feel free to press back after I say what I'm going to say. But let's see here. These are my versions, right? As you know, Dharma itself is a word that, oh my God, it's huge. But for purposes of this, I'm going to say this question: what is the virtuous or moral life? And my, or not my answer, but my way of expressing the answer here is to fulfill the desire for purpose, to occupy your niche in the habitat of life. It's very specific language. I've borrowed in part from Bill Plotkin, wrote a seminal book called Soulcraft. This idea that part of your dharma is to be you, nobody else, right? This is very important. When I was 16, I acquired a disorder. I like to make up disorders. I acquired a disorder I call "Why Aren't I Gandhi" syndrome. The movie Gandhi with Ben Kingsley came out. I was 16 years old. My parents took me to it. They said, you're gonna eat this up. You're gonna love this movie. I'd heard the name, but and I was like, sure enough, right? And so for a long time afterward, I thought, I got to be like that. Well, there's an obvious reason why I'm not him. I'm not him. So what is your unique destiny, your unique flowering and purpose, right? So think of each flower, each animal having its niche or niche, if you want to put it that way. And then, of course, we have Artha, Karma, and Moksha. And I'm lining these up with some Western psychology here. Many of you will be familiar with this hierarchy. Obviously, if there's an earthquake here in California, my purpose will no longer be to attempt to expound on purpose. I will duck under my desk and hope the house doesn't fall on me, right? So physiological and safety concerns come first. But we also have the desire to feel like we belong just in our human community to someone and to something. We also want to be esteemed. I hope that you will like me and this lecture as opposed to thinking, well, this guy doesn't know anything, right? Okay, and now we come to self-actualization and self-transcendence. 2 more minutes and I'll stop. So we have in this middle world safety, belonging, self-esteem, right? And in the Vedantic desires, I think this is, we need the requisite, we need health. If I'm like totally, unbelievably sick, I'm just going to need to get better, right? I also desire to be happy, just everyday happiness, to spend time with my son and wife, to watch my Netflix videos, to eat my corn chips, to whatever it is that you enjoy. I like listening to jazz. But now let's make a distinction between self-actualization and self-transcendence, as Maslow talks about it, and provisionally, and this isn't a perfect match, I want to be clear, I'm somewhat forcing it, but also not, that self-actualization is the area of soul, where our awareness rests as soul. The fruition is soul purpose embodiment. And the inquiry is, how do I bring my gifts to my people? What is the aim of life? What is my place? What is my duty? My duty is to be Jonathan, not Gandhi, clearly, right? Your duty is to be you, but you would have to know who you are and not just in the middle world. And then there's self-transcendence. In Maslow's theory, it came actually very late. At the end of his life, he realized self-actualization wasn't the tip of the pyramid. He came to understand that self-transcendence was yet another move. And if this was more asking me to come here as a meditation teacher, I'd talk more about that. Okay, I think we should probably take some questions. I'm going to close that and stop. And yeah. Now I would like to talk a little more about soul and soul work, how one discovers. So questions, thoughts, disagreements? Yeah, Gopal.
Okay. Self-transcendent, if we were to fit into the Maslow model, where do you think it will stand? At the bottom or somewhere close to self-actualization?
Say the first part. I didn't.
Self-transcendent I'm talking about.
Self-transcendence. Yeah.
Where would it fit into the Maslow model? Is it
Yeah. So,
at the rock bottom, even below the survival? Is it somewhere closer to the self-actualization? That's what I just like to talk to you.
so if I'm understanding your question, it's an interesting situation because ultimately we exist in nothing but self-transcendence, because the self as a discrete separate entity is something of an illusion. So it starts in non-time, in eons of non-time. There has only been self-transcendence. That is to say, there's only the unbounded mystery that animates and permeates everything, yet transcends all. So in a sense, in that pyramid, it's the entire pyramid. It's the ground of being on which the pyramid rests. But from the point of view, because we're spirit taking a human journey, when we get lost in the notion that we are a discrete human on a spiritual journey, then we conceive of it thus. Oh, I got to make sure I can pay the bills and I have food and all that. That's obvious. I want to belong. I want to feel esteem. Then the next one, according to Maslow, is self-actualization, to really be whole just in that the level of ego and personality. And then I would say self-actualization, this is where it gets a little confusing. Self-actualization has two flavors: the self-actualized ego, but then the self-actualized soul. Well, soul's already self-actualized. It doesn't need us, but it does, which is to say, sorry about the paradox, that through us, we can become available to soul and therefore become self-actualized through allowing soul to live as us. And the next step, and it's not linear, by the way, but since the pyramid has a top, the next step is self-transcendence.
So let me clarify my understanding and then I'll close. That self-transcendent is a kind of continuous journey. It's a rolling horizon, if I can use that word, and it can happen to me anytime during that journey. Yeah, so awakening, and I can get awakened at any stage of my development, whether it is survival or actualization, or even in the middle of belonging and also my status arrangement. Is that understanding clear?
Yes, I think it is. And though, here's again with the paradox. Whenever there's paradox, we get closer to the truth. On the one hand, that's completely true. At any time or non-time, we can have a moment of dissolution of the separate self and experience ourselves as the unbounded mystery, the primordial ground itself, at any time. It doesn't take work. It's not a progressive path, and so forth. So my Ru teacher, Ramana Maharshi, he used to give different instruction to different people. Some people needed a progressive path. They just had to have it. Others, he could simply say something like, just be. Now, for most of us, Ramana Maharshi says, just be, and then you raise your, can you say a little more? And you'd say, if I have to, right? But mostly he didn't even want to say that. He would just be samadhi radiating, and that itself would have the ability to actually open up the person who is in front of them. Now, having said all that, there's also can be, and often is, though it doesn't have to be so, that there is a progression, that people in their younger years will try to formulate their everyday personality and ego, establish their needs for esteem and belonging, the householder, right? This is in Indian teaching, right? And then later on, one can kind of step away, partially or fully renounce one's everyday life and devote oneself to transcendence. But there's no one way it works. I mean, Ramana Maharshi was 16 and boom. In his case, it seems to me he had what I would call an abiding enlightenment. My experience is not abiding. I don't abide as the unbounded mystery every second. But intermittently, Jonathan disappears completely. And all that's left is like a Jonathan veil and the light of awareness looking out through its eyes. And then I see, and maybe Niharika will speak to this in a moment, that which was subject, which is to say, Jonathan, becomes an object in the awareness of, I'll call it, the undivided. That's very interesting, or soul.
I think to me it sums up what I'm using. Somewhere I read, I don't know, don't ask me the source because I'm not well read on Maharishi. But what he said, I know is not knowledge. I know, I don't know, that's also not knowledge. I don't know, that is knowledge. Finding that, I think, is what you are referring to as self-transcendent. Yeah, when I know what I am not, I don't even know what I am not, and finding that would be the purpose, right? Is that
beautiful?
Thank you very much.
Put.
Thank you for the
yeah. It's interesting. My experience is when Jonathan completely drops away, I can't talk about it till after he comes back. So I'm sitting there at the dinner table just, a few nights ago, and I see my son, and all of a sudden Jonathan drops away. I don't usually have mystical experiences at the dinner table, but this day I did. And I saw myself, the body dying, and my son merging, and then him having a child one day, he's 11 now, and then him dying. And I just saw the whole play as the unbounded awareness itself. But it was only after that period of time that I could then sort of step back as Jonathan and tell my wife, hey, you know what just happened while we were eating salmon at the table. So it's very interesting. Well, I'd love to take more questions, but Niharika has some really juicy things to share.
Yeah, so when you said subject object, I was thinking of this beautiful story that Devdutt Patnaik explains in the Netflix documentary Devlok. He talks about these two parrots on a tree. One of the parrots, some of you might have seen this, one of the parrots is eating a fruit and enjoying the fruit. And there's another parrot that's sitting above and just watching the other parrot eat. So what he says is that parrot that's like enjoying the fruit is the body or the mind, and the other parrot is just observing that. So the mind is observing the body in this case. And then there's a level beyond that in which it's actually the soul or the consciousness that's then observing the mind or the ego. And there's a whole theory in psychology of adult development, Kegan's theory, in which he talks about this fundamental shift that happens when the thing that we have been subject to becomes object. And that is why meditation is such a powerful tool. It's because it's primarily about sitting back and just witnessing whatever is arising in me as thoughts, as feelings. And at some point, sort of, it's ego watching those things. And then at some point, one starts noticing that there's something beyond that, and that is consciousness or just awareness. And so if I had to sort of put purpose development work in terms of theory, I would say that is sort of the fundamental shift that is happening, which is why it's like to work with purpose as a tool, it can be a developmental tool that fundamentally takes people from the sort of conditioned beliefs and views and ideas that they've come to be imbibed with by society and culture to move towards more of a sense of who I really am. And that is sort of why purpose work feels deeply grounding. It feels more like I'm going deep in and out rather than the transcendent going up and out thing. It feels more deeply going inwards into myself. It feels like the question, because some of you might be wondering, like, what's the relationship between purpose, which sounds like a goal-directed, outwardly directed aspiration. What's the connection between purpose, having a goal, and like inner nature and these things we're talking about spirituality? And I would say in my experience, the question of finding out what work to do in the world, what am I called to do, is really more a question of finding out who am I at my core, what is my true nature, and reaching that deeply buried place. Yeah.
Do we take another question, or should we get to the next section?
I think Niharika, you're kind of on a roll. So do you want to continue?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I want to speak about, it sounds great, right? All of us want to live our purpose. All of us want to live, because research says that living our purpose brings us more happiness, brings us more fulfillment. So why would any of us not want to find our purpose? And then what happens is I want to wake up in the morning, switch off the alarm, get up, but then I promptly sort of go back to sleep. And that happens so frequently to me on every morning. So there are these competing commitments in myself that in the morning wants to wake up and knows it. There's a big part of me that knows it's important to wake up, but then there's a huge part of me that just wants to go back right to sleep. So a lot of the work is actually working with those competing forces in ourselves. In putting it in the frame that Jonathan used, it's often the personality, the ego, the more middle world level of us that wants to really adjust and get along in society, be liked by people, make money and all those things, that has an issue with actually finding out what our deeper soul level purpose might be. Who am I at my core? Because what if it reveals that I just don't, what if people don't like me? The people in my life don't approve of me. And so working with those default purposes, because all of us sort of have a purpose. Every one of us has a purpose already. Many of us are subject to a default purpose. And if I speak of this in Kegan's theory, that is like the stage 3, the more socialized mind, the more socialized view, which is when we sort of imbibed all these views and values and ideas from the world. And that's a very important stage, because that's the stage we come to when we've sort of grown from adolescence and we started respecting other people's points of view, we started seeing other people's perspectives, and that's the phase that allows us to integrate with community, value culture, value society. And often what happens though is that then becomes imbibed and we are sort of subject to that default purpose, right? It's living itself through us unconsciously. And so in purpose work, what we are enabling is a subject-object shift. Which is why meditation is such a powerful tool to sort of begin to see what are these default beliefs I've been living out unconsciously. So fundamentally, because this is an integral approach, which is why Jonathan talked about the 3 worlds, there are some schools of thought that say just wake up and like seek salvation. I personally have found that to be very ungrounding, because I feel like then, there's this normal everyday reality, and then I'm reading all these spiritual books and I'm like, I'm unable to bridge the gap. What soul work or purpose work does is deeply burying us down to that uniqueness in ourselves, which can bridge these 2 worlds. And that is why I'm such a purpose advocate, is because I feel like it's the missing bridge in a lot of these sort of spiritual conversations. Enabling people to sort of burrow into their depths. And often it feels like archaeology when you start doing that, because a lot of these gifts have been buried. And they've been buried sort of under these more middle world concerns of safety, security, belonging, of what will people think? Log kya sochenge? It's such a big thing here, right? Growing up, I think most of us would have gone to schools where we were just told to sort of get good grades, do well in certain subjects, aspire to become engineers, doctors, or go in a certain direction, because that's the route that will bring us success, prestige, and all of these things. Very few of us probably, even though we've grown up in a culture where soul and dharma and these things are very much part of everyday conversation. Still, very few of us in our real experience might have actually had that kind of support to really find our own gifts and live our gifts out into the world, right? So which is why there are all these voices that have come into being in our head protecting us so that we can fit into the world. And if I just share like one story to explain what I mean, it's the story from the World War II of the loyal soldier. So apparently during the World War II, there were all these couple of men who got stranded on islands because they were shipwrecked, plane wrecked, and some of them were found after 30 years. So when they were found, of course, Japan had lost the World War was long over, but they continued to believe that the war was still happening. They continued to believe that the war was still ongoing. And when people told them, that's in the past, let's move on, that had been the mission that had kept them going for that long, that had helped them survive. So they were still on that mission. So what the people of Japan did when these people came back to Japan is not to sort of persuade them, heckle them, saying, move on, like that war effort is over. Instead, they welcomed them with love. They welcomed them as heroes and did celebrations in their name, and said, really, thank you for your service because you've served us for that long. And what we believe is we need to work with the parts in ourselves in very much the same way. So how does that relate with what I was saying earlier about education? Giving an example from my own life, maybe. I remember sometime when I was 9 years old, in 3rd grade, I had this teacher I really liked. And school was closing down for the summer, and I really wanted to show her my gratitude. So I made this card, put a lot of love and creativity into it, gave her this card to thank her. And then a couple of days later, when school was shutting down on the last day, people had come and sweep the floor of the classroom. And this boy calls to me from across the classroom, and he points to the trash, and he shows me that my card is lying in the trash. So little 9-year-old me was like heartbroken because I had put so much of myself into this card and really wanted to share my love and creativity. And so that kind of a moment in someone's life, as it did in my life, can create one of these voices. So for me, the protector emerged. The protector who's like, don't make yourself vulnerable out there. Just don't share your gifts with the world. People won't value you. Maybe the hider emerged. So this is the voice that's saying, just hide away. Don't show yourself. Don't take up space. Then, you won't be hurt. Maybe the voice of the achiever emerged, right? Like, if you do really well in your studies, your teacher will like you. Then she'll value you. So you don't have to take these kind of risks. Just keep achieving. That's the way people are going to approve of you. So a lot of us have these voices that are often formed at some point in childhood, which are actually the one that's pulling us back in the bed. Because they're like, no, if you go live your purpose, people are going to judge you. They're not going to value you. They're going to reject you possibly. You're not going to be successful. Get back in bed. So working with these voices is a key part at the middle world level of the work. Because otherwise people are going to sort of have this deep discovery of who I am, my spiritual nature, my true nature, and then not be able to come back and actually live their gifts out in the world. And what I really want to emphasize is that working with these voices is actually part of the work. It's not, there's a tendency to be like, okay, now that I know what the problem is, it's all these voices, I'm going to go in, dismantle them, get rid of them, and make sure this person lives their purpose because I'm a coach who has to make sure they do that. But that is actually not helpful, just like it wouldn't have been with the loyal soldier in that story. The reason the loyal soldiers were able to reintegrate into society was because people met them with love and really genuinely thanked them for what they had done all those years when they were on that war mission. So what we really need to do in this work, we use a tool called voice dialogue for this, is to have compassionate conversation and accepting conversation with these voices and really try and understand them, because often these voices reveal our purpose. Often these voices have buried parts of our soul which were deeply connected with our destiny and purpose. And engaging with these voices can reveal those sacred wounds that often unlock a part of our purpose. So often a lot of us have some sacred wound that we got in childhood, which has been sort of like a place where we have uniquely been hurt in some way or wounded, and working through that has been one of the major teachings or lessons of our own life. And so more than any university education, college education, that is actually the education often in our life. And if we can use this kind of tool to sort of enter that space, we can find out what is that broken-hearted place in myself that connects with some broken-hearted place in the world. What is the suffering in the world that most speaks to me because it's in me? And that is sort of how we see purpose, is that purpose is ultimately that place where your deep gladness, something that really brings you alive, and the world's deep hunger meet. And this is a quote by Frederick Buechner. So finding that place where my heart breaks open because I have been wounded in that similar place. So in my case, for example, my purpose emerged. I trained as an architect. That was my middle world pursuit for a while. It was the thing that would get me degree, it would get me success, get me to fit in the way I thought at that time. But when I really started asking this question of what is my purpose and realized it was deeply connected to my true nature, I realized part of my healing, my main sacred wound, had been this buried gift of self-expression. This buried, and it was often not just that incident that happened when I was 9. It was a series of patterns of incidents which were of a similar nature. And so often all of us might see that. These are like soul print hints through our life. They can reveal what our soul has been teaching us. And so following that can be a helpful way to first begin this journey, just listening to those patterns. So my gifts of self-expression, my gift of love, my gift of creativity, just wanting to share, wanting to put my gifts out there, had gotten sort of buried, which is why my purpose today is to hold spaces where others' gifts are seen, where their self-expression can naturally emerge, especially for younger people, because I know sort of what that was like, to have to hide those parts of myself that mattered. And so that's why that's why my soul purpose has emerged as a space holder, as somebody who actually ignites that longing in young people's soul. Yeah, I see your question.
Niharika, half of the world, and I'm also victim of that, is basing their growth on this what they call feedback. Yeah, I mean, to me, I need to be authenticated most of the time to move forward in my life, isn't that?
Yeah.
And it's a sickness which is prevailing all around us. Whether you go to the mall or you attend a training program, what they every wanted, and no offense meant, I am also one of them, because I think, unless people say I'm good, I don't believe myself. But this is the one. I mean, I'm just picking up from the thread that you gave me, is that if I suffer from that, how can I really grow? How can I find my purpose? The key to my character and personality lies in all of you. Your hands. You turn the key and I smile. You turn the key and I start crying. I mean, is that really what I need to be suffering from? And if I'm suffering from that, can I really grow? That's the thought process which is happening to me. Maybe you can throw some light on that, Jonathan.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to pick up that thread because I was going to speak to that. I think you're absolutely right. That need for validation and belonging is so strongly etched in us. What will everyone approve of me? So many of the default purposes that emerge have to do with like people will reject me, people will not approve of me. This is selfish to live my purpose. I'm not important enough or smart enough to be listened to. All of these things to do with judgment. And so what is possible to do is actually work with that and transform it. So if the need for validation, belonging is such a fundamental need, what if we use that same element in the coaching work and actually transform our relationship with it, because we can't do away with it. And the mistake we often do is to say, hey, to find your purpose, you have to go away into hiding for like 5 years, find yourself in a mountain and then come back. That's not going to work. And that can actually lead to some spiritual bypassing. You might bypass crucial stages of your development. What we actually need is supportive containers, community that actually changes our traditional associations with community where it's not about advice and opinion giving and telling who you should be, but communities that are framed in such a way where it's all about listening each other's souls into discovery, communities where you are fundamentally there for the other person to become themselves. So as a concrete tool, one of the things we use in the program is Circle of Trust. It's a framework given by Parker Palmer, who's an educator. It's this idea that you form a community of friends who will meet you throughout your purpose discovery journey. And their role is to just be silent listeners for the most part, helping you deepen your awareness of your true nature. And most people will sort of object to that in the beginning. I just started a group program a couple of weeks ago, and when the clients read that they have to form their circles of trust, they were up in arms. I don't want to tell people I'm doing this. I don't want people to know. I want to do this secretly. It's a spiritual journey. Why should I tell people? But that is key. Like, the need for validation, belonging is so strong. We can't get away with it. We have to work with it and transform it. Jonathan, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. Beautiful answer. So when we're with a coaching client, if we are lodged pretty firmly, if your client, your coaching client is lodged pretty firmly in Maslow's need for being esteemed, the work will slow down and grind to a halt. That's not wrong and it's not bad, but the coach needs to address that, because clear seeing and clear hearing cannot happen when we are simply attuned to that feedback loop of receiving affirmation. So I admit at this moment, right now, when I attend to it, I realize I would like you to esteem me. I would like you to think I'm smart and erudite and whatever. But if my accent of attention is on looking good, then I will not be able to authentically express, and I will not be able to authentically listen. So one of the things we need to meet is the resistance to embodying our purpose. And one of them is, what will people think? How will they approve of me? If I tell you, which I did already, right, that I believe I had a vision when I was 20 to be a whole person midwife, there is a high level of risk that I will sound like a California New Age idiot, right? And so in fact, I read the comments, a fellow, I think it happened actually. Let's see if I can find him. It was a good one. Somebody, they're gone now, but okay, Marshall Goldstein wrote to everybody, what's the topic? General Balderdash? Okay, so it happened. It happened right in the workshop, right? The disapprobation is very strong there, right? Person didn't understand that we're talking about purpose and purpose discovery, and they thought what I was saying was balderdash. Does that hurt? A little. But here's the thing. There is a progression. And at first, when we're adolescents and then way long into adulthood for 99.9% of us, the purpose is to cultivate community of similarity and experience self-acceptance, right? That's the goal. But then we can go and do that in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way till we die. So what I'm suggesting with our clients is when they come with that powerful, urgent desire to live their purpose, to know where they belong, what their place is, that we gently do a little voice dialogue work with the voice of needing to be accepted, to be esteemed, and we allow that to kind of come to the side, and then we can listen, right? So this is what I mean by discovery. So think about it. At some point you discovered your sexual attractions, right? When I was, I don't know, 9, 10, I started noticing girls in a way that led me to believe I was heterosexual. Now I live in a homophobic culture to a large degree, so I can imagine there could have been resistance, but let's put that aside for a moment. It's a listening. I didn't choose. There weren't 3 options, right? I will choose to be homosexual, bisexual, or heterosexual. I didn't look at it as a menu. I noticed what was authentic and indigenous to me. I listened, not with my head, but with my skin, with my heart, with my solar plexus, my body, with my imagination. All of these informed the attraction and desire. And it's the same thing with soul and your purpose. You don't choose, right? And to the ego, that's bad news. I didn't choose to be a whole person midwife. What 20-year-old young college student male wants to be a whole person midwife? Nobody. But there it was. There it was. And so as coaches, we can guide our people, right, to put aside as much as they can, given whatever level of maturity they have, their needs for belonging and acceptance, and to actually listen. Listen and discover what you actually are. And we all know there are cases of homosexual people who didn't want to receive the disapprobation from their families, lived as if they were straight, and then it fell apart because it wasn't true, right? And then they hurt their spouse, and they're doing, So. Someone has a question here. Can the internal feedback loop of seeking validation from ourselves in finding the right purpose or our internal truth or the validation of self-acceptance also distort our listening? Yes. I'll say more maybe. Is purpose objective? That's a great question. So I'll give a sort of indirect answer. No. And yes. If you believe that you are a discrete, separate self and that you contain something called a purpose, then the subject would be you and the object would be purpose. As a person given to mystical proclivities, that's not my experience. Whole person midwife is closer to my true name. Jonathan was the name that my parents gave me. They weren't mystics, like most of our parents weren't. They didn't look into my eyes and see who I was. I had to discover that. And what I've come to understand is that purpose isn't a thing, it's more like a verb. It's more like a thing that happens, that unfolds, it flowers naturally. And so, my cats are themselves. We have 3 cats in this house and 2 humans. 3 humans. Jeez, that was weird. 3 cats and 3 humans. Wow, my family, I'll tell them I made that slip. And so, but they are themselves, they're not trying, they don't know they're cats, they don't think about being cats, and each one has their individual personality. So if we were able to get out of our way, we would discover that we would naturally blossom. But our families weren't there, and our cultures generally aren't there to support us. The best my parents could do, and it was pretty good, they said to me repeatedly at the table, what do you want to be when you grow up? And what they meant, something probably like what many of your parents meant, is what job do you want to get? Because we want you to be, comfortable and middle class and all the good stuff. And indeed, I'm glad to be middle class. But that's not the deepest question. The deepest question. So now I have an 11-year-old, and I say to him, did you know that secreted within you is a soul level purpose? And like Niharika quoted Frederick Buechner, you will find some expression, some demonstration of love that is the following. It's your deepest gladness, it's your deepest joy, and the world needs it, right? I used to think maybe I'll be a ski racer or a jazz drummer, but I wasn't given the gifts to, excel at the highest level of those. No one wants to watch me ski and listen to me play jazz drums, right? It brings me alive, but it doesn't meet the ache of the world. So this is something you can ask your people, right? If they say, I love painting, but they're an average painter, go, great, bring yourself alive, but the world isn't actually wanting that from you, right? I'd like to be Yo-Yo Ma, I'm not. So I say to him, there's a place in you, your deepest gladness and the world's hunger. Do you know what that is? He says, no. And I say, well, of course, you're 11. Don't worry about it. I said, I just want to put it on in your awareness so that you can find that place in your own life. And we can ask that. We can be what your clients' parents and your clients' schools and your clients' rituals and this and that they didn't get. That's the power of a coach, to ask a psychoactive, deep question and feel the truth of it. You have a place, a dharma, a duty, an aim, a purpose in the evolution of life. You're not a mistake. You don't get to choose, right? Yo-Yo Ma did, he did choose to keep playing, but he didn't choose his gift. The gift is what he is, and he is a servant of it, and I am a servant of my purpose. Okay. Niharika, is there anything you wanted to chime in before I go to the next little piece?
Yeah, I was wondering about introducing the voice dialogue
Sure.
piece, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so let's do a little quick experiential and go to your Zoom chat. So maybe just close your eyes for a moment and ask yourself this. Imagine I had a magic wand. I had a power, I had a city, and I could just, in this moment, I don't, but let's just say I had it, and I could wave my hand, and you would have a complete, abiding soul purpose enlightenment right now, and it would be forever. For real. Now, here's the question. Is there any part of you that has a little reservation, and let's say you trust me, just in this thought experiment, he's not gonna, it's for real. So, or pick someone you trust, the prophet, Ramana Maharshi, the Buddha, Jesus, whomever you trust. And they come to you and they offer you that. Oh, wait. All right, so now here's the question. Do you have any fear? Do you have any reservation? Do you have any concern? Right? Arjuna sure did. No, I don't want, no. Please no. The whole Bhagavad Gita it's the whole dialogue on this question, right? So this has deep roots. So if you would, write down what one of those concerns or anxieties or fears would be. Right? Why I'm a Zen student and a student of the Vedanta? Why aren't the Zen monasteries and all of Ramana Maharshi's disciples all totally, absolutely awake? Well, here's one reason. The people who call themselves students don't really want the thing the teacher is asking. Not because they're insincere, but because they're afraid. What if Jonathan disappeared for good? He'd still be alive and talking, but you know what I mean, as the center of our identity. So if you'd write something down, what is one reason that you'd be a little hesitant or fearful to know your purpose? Shy group. Wait. Great. What if I'm wrong? What if I listen really deeply and the thing that I hear, the still small voice that speaks to me my purpose, I get it wrong? My life will never be the same. Why upset the apple cart, right? Homeostasis is not only about regulating our temperature, if you have a decent life. If you have a terrible life, then you have less risk. But let's say your life is not bad. Enough food, decent place to shelter, a few friends. Why would you risk that? Good. This is a good one. Suresh, will I be able to achieve it, right? Because discovering your purpose is different than embodying it. Excellent. Where will my next drink come from? That's good. Yeah, where will I get my next bourbon? I mean, I love purpose, but I mean, I've been sick for 3 weeks. I've had meningitis, so I've had to stop my my bourbon. You know, where will I get my fix? My little fun. What will I have to let go of? What will need to be relinquished? When we marry, I'm presuming you have a traditional marriage like I have. When I married my wife, we've been together 23 years, I gave up the right to have sexual relationships with anybody else. I don't think I'm naturally that monogamous. I'm like, yes, I want to have sex with one person for 60 years if I live that old. No. So there's a sacrifice for something so deep, because when you commit to your purpose, it's a marriage. It's a marriage that's stronger than a marriage to a partner. And absolute fidelity. It's like there's a poet, he says, you have to make a promise it would kill you to break, to really step into it. And we see that with the great ones. We see Yo-Yo Ma, he can't not practice. Ramana Maharshi, he sat in the cave for, I can't remember how many years, 8 years, right? They had to brush the ants away from, I mean, he just was embodying and integrating that blinding, unbounded experience. What if it is different from what I desire? Yeah. So what if we find a purpose and we don't like it? By definition, and through my 20 years of experience, that one I will just tell you, it doesn't actually happen that way. When you discover what is truly yours, I'm not saying it doesn't have some like scary elements, it does, but no, you do desire it. To live authentically is our deepest and our most indigenous desire. Yeah. Good. Good. All right. Maybe I'll do a quick, oh, wow, the time went by. Shoot. Okay. I have a lot more I want to say. Let's see if there's any questions. You can either wave your hand or you can go to participants, click, and there's a little hand icon. So we have about 16, 18 minutes left.
I have a question.
Please.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I have a question. So thank you very much, Niharika and Jonathan. It's been a beautiful morning. The question I have for you is, you said it's your deepest joy that you find your purpose and it has to meet an ache in the world. Yeah, you may love skiing, but that's not what people want to see. But I think if you go back to the first question, is to find that deepest joy in the way Niharika kind of explained, the soul whispers, giving you messages right through about self-expression. And even if you were to find those soul whispers and the slaps or whatever you call them, how would you truly then know that that's what it is?
Yeah, beautiful question. So I can't offer, I wish I could. I wish I could offer a proof. What I will share is my experience and some of what the feedback I've received from hundreds of people I've worked with. There is something self-authenticating.
Right.
That's not self-authenticating.
Yeah.
It's like when I met my wife, I mean, I thought I loved her. And turns out, I think I do. Same thing with my son. What else? Do I really love skiing? Do I really love jazz drumming? I do. There is a kind of trust that comes with it. When I heard the soul name, whole person midwife, it was like, of course, that's it. Now, there was no reason. as a Jewish young man to understand anything about whole person midwifery, and I never heard it, and I've never heard it since from anybody else. It fit. It was like a bespoke, tailored suit or garment or dress or whatever it may be. There is the feeling of finally taking your place. And it's one of the definitions, I think, of soul that is really excellent. It's a little counterintuitive, but soul is place. When you occupy your place in time and space, right?
Yeah.
Then you feel just like, you're an instrument of life. You're just, this is what you were meant to do and what you were meant to be. And then there's feedback, right? So let's say I lived my purpose as a whole person midwife for years, and it didn't work. No one liked it. Everyone was like the guy who wrote, this is balderdash, right? That would be good feedback. Or if I kept trying to date my wife and she said, go away. So there's also a feedback loop. So between your own self-authenticating trust and feedback, you have a sense.
I get that. That's yes, you're right. It's very subtle. But if there was a way that one had to sit with oneself, in the space of mindfulness or meditation, and if there was a process that one can ask a question to find that purpose, or look at your life like a river of life, and then see what was flowing through it and where the blockages were. Where and how would that process be to be able to put that halt and say, yes, okay, here are the messages I am getting, which would lead me to the soul purpose. So I think what I'm really asking is there a process that one could also go through and it doesn't necessarily have to be long. We've all done different kinds of work in our life that would allow you to just take that little, sometimes it's that blink of that moment and you're there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, that's the key question. How do we actually coach people? So
Exactly.
let me quickly get to it, because that's the point of this whole thing.
Right.
Okay, so you remember the three worlds, right?
Yeah.
If you ask the middle world, your everyday personality and ego, the answer is, I have no idea. Are you kidding me? You're asking my intellect what my soul level purpose is, or even if such a thing exists. Not a good place to go. Okay, the second place you can go is the pure transcendent. So that's probably not going to work for most people. Now it can work, but here's a demonstration of how it doesn't work. When my wife was ahead of me in terms of wanting to get married, I was a little slower to get to it, and she's like putting some pressure on me. Yeah, and I'm like, oh yeah, for sure, but I'm not quite ready. So finally, I just I got down on my hands and knees. I don't usually pray in an old school style to someone. So anyway, I prayed of all people to Ramana Maharshi. Big mistake. So for the first and only time, I heard a voice, and I said, is she the right one? Should I get married to, her name was Wendy Robbins. The answer, it was really quite something, I can't describe it, was, it doesn't matter. And I thought, oh no. What? That's your answer? But the second I heard it, I thought, that might have been him, because he wasn't like a particularly relational character he loved his mountain. And so I was like, okay, don't ask the unbounded timeless mystery. So there's the third option. And this is the one that I should have asked about the marriage. So I had to make my own decision, because I didn't ask soul in that moment so much. And I was like, I want to marry her. so thank you, Ramana Maharshi, for whatever you did. The third is to take the underworld journey. Now, I don't mean like, underworld like hell or anything like that. I mean more like the shamanic descent, where we descend to what is spiritually unique in us, and I call it soul, but you can call it by any name you want. And we have a conversation. We ask in real time, right? So I have all these meditations, but in the end, I'll be honest, they're all the same thing, which is this. We ask up here, I'll put up the questions.
Okay.
How How do I do that? Nope. Wrong one. Share screen. Okay. Here we go. I'll skip that one. Okay, here we go. Wavelengths of purpose. So we can say to soul, right? We're quiet. Now we don't listen with our intellect. So you might want to write this down. Here's the 5 ways I ask people to listen. Listen with your skin. Listen with every pore, right? Because it takes your attention away from the mind and it begins to make you more sensate, more tactile, more, that's another word I'm looking for. Second, listen with your heart. Reach out with your feelings. Listen through attending to your feelings in the emotional tone and fragrance. 3, listen with your belly, with your body. You know, the belly is its own sort of, brain. 4, and this one's very important, listen with the faculty of imagination. Imagination is an organ of perception that coaches, we want to use this. We don't want them to think up their purpose because that's probably not going to work. And I'm not talking about an imagination like, oh, if I win the lottery, I'm going to take a 6-month trip. And what am I going to do? I'm going to buy some nice cars. I'm going to go around the world and stay in 5-star hotels. That's a fantasy. Sounds nice. If I played lottery, maybe I would go do it. But that's me generating a fantasy. What I'm talking about is receiving, right? In my mind's eye, on the screen of awareness, I saw a picture and heard words, whole person midwifery. That was the organ of perception. Yeah? So what are the questions we ask? We can ask straight up and say, what is my purpose to soul? And then use these 4 or 5 different methods, right? But we can also break it down. So if you think of purpose as just like the white light of your purpose, and you put it through this prism, what is my vision? What are my soul core values? Wholeness, you hear me say it again and again, or integral, are very dear to me. I'm in love with them. What are my soul core powers? One thing I like to do, I like to study everything, and then I like to reorganize it. In a sense, I'm a synthesizer, right? Carl Jung was like an originator. He created some pretty fresh ideas, the collective unconscious and right? So you find out what are my soul core powers? What is my essence? What is my giveaway, task, message? I'll say one more thing about this, delivery vehicle. Many times, and you want to be careful with the people you're coaching, a vocation with a small v or a career or a job is not a purpose. It's not. It is a delivery vehicle for the purpose. So here in the United States, I don't know if pizza is a thing in India, but here the #1 food people order in to have delivered to your house is pizza, an American version of the Italian recipe. And if the pizzeria, the restaurant is close, right? They can walk it to you. They can take it on a bike. They can take it in a car, a truck. They could deliver it by a tank or a drone, right? But what's the actual thing they're delivering? Oh, if you could please, what's the word? Mute yourself, everybody. That would be great because I hear a lot of pans and pots. So they're delivering pizza no matter what, or Chinese food or Indian food or whatever it is, Mexican food. So what are my delivery vehicles? Psychotherapist, meditation teacher, purpose guide. But I want to be clear, if you remember nothing else, those are not my purposes. Those are vehicles through which my purpose of midwifing wholeness come out. It's so important to know that. I once taught for about a 10, 11-year period in a hospital setting. And as a clinician, a therapist, they had me teach first overcoming depression. And it went very well. So they offered me another class. Do you want to teach mind-body medicine? Yeah. So I taught that and I got good feedback. And they're like, well, you want to teach couples communication? Yeah. You want to teach mindfulness-based stress reduction? Yeah. So finally my supervisor said, and this is a small pool, it's only 13 teachers. So, but nonetheless, I was the top ranked teacher. And my supervisor said, how do you do that? You keep teaching different curriculums and getting the best grades. And I don't think I told her the truth, but I'll tell you the truth, because I know what my purpose is. And I was always attempting to midwife the wholeness of the person. And that is the medicine. So those wavelengths, so that the short answer to your question and the question of the whole time we had together, and then I'll come in for a landing, is that we want to ask the right question. What is my purpose? We want to ask it in a way that soul can really give us specific information, right? And that's why I broke it down into 8. I could have done it 6 or 4 or 10. And we want to ask the right person. Don't necessarily ask Godhead, or Ramana Maharshi or whatever. Ask soul. Ask the place in you that cares more than anything else, more passionately than anything else, about you living your gifts, living your soul's purpose as a demonstration of love, a demonstration of activism in the world. And so you want to facilitate a dialogue. That's the punchline. As coaches, we want to facilitate a dialogue between our everyday personality and ego, our intellect, and some spiritual depth. We don't have to say spiritual to our clients, although some of them will actually appreciate that you are including their spirituality as they understand it, and let them know that they have it, that it's there. You're not a psychic. I mean, unless you are. You don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what anyone's purpose is. I don't know what yours is, but I'm good at teaching people how to listen to soul. And you can be too. Questions? And of course, Niharika, you're always free to jump in. I think we have just a few minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add to that, because I work with a lot of younger people who may not have yet discovered spirituality, that instead of calling it soul, I try to understand, is there something they believe in that is more than the everyday? So often they will say, I just have a feeling there's something more, or there's just some longing. So I asked them to speak to that. Or for Paco Palmer, he says, don't tell your life what you intend to do with it. Ask your life what it intends to do with you. So sometimes I just say, ask your life to reveal itself. So not necessarily, pitching it as soul, because maybe that's what I believe, but maybe that's not for them. And sometimes I find on the calls, one has to deliberately go into the feeling and the body, because we're really conditioned to think from the head. So asking people to go out in nature, take a walk, and ask the question to nature, or walk while asking the question, so that you're not just thinking from your head. On a call, you might say something like, how did that feel in your body? How did you experience that in yourself when that happened? And so getting into the level of experience, emotion, feeling more. Sometimes people don't even have words for feelings. That's something I'm finding, because school never taught us how to name our feelings. So you might actually have to work more with the body and even putting a language to those feelings.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll say, the reason I like the word soul is because it does defy explanation, right? Soul is a way of listening. It's a type of perception. It's a type of imagination. It's a place. And I couldn't, even though I've been studying and teaching this for decades, I still can't tell you precisely what soul is, which is a good thing. But you can say your gut, your innermost, your intuition, the still small voice. Where we want the people we're coaching to be is in that state of listening to some depth of themselves. And then something beautiful can arise. And so that's a lot of what we do as coaches or guides, is to help them have a deeper listening. And I love what Niharika just said. We go out into wild nature. We listen through our pores. We listen through our feelings. We listen through our wounds. She was talking about the loyal soldier, right? We listen through these places, the harder and more difficult places. And the more it's difficult for them to stretch into that listening, the better. Don't go for easy, because a poor mind, soul level purpose, your deep destiny and purpose will blow out our brains. And not, I don't mean shoot, I mean our brains will not be up to the task, right? How do I love my wife? I can't think of an intellectual reason. So I ask something deeper in me. What is it to be a good husband? And then I have to just listen, because how would I know? I don't know. Yeah.
I'm afraid, we would have loved to keep talking on this topic, Jonathan and Niharika. I'm afraid we are almost towards the end of this session. Just about a couple of minutes left. So any closing thoughts that you'd like to give? And in parallel, what we'll do is we'll launch the poll for everyone's feedback as well. So just take 30 seconds to fill that. And thank you so much, because it's been a beautiful, beautiful morning with such beautiful nuggets coming from the two of you. Lots to ponder on and think about. So any closing thoughts from you, Jonathan and Niharika?
Yeah. Niharika, do you have anything you want to part with?
Yeah. Want to speak to that voice in me, which when somebody said boulder dash to this, I was like, oh, my voices of protector, hider, everything came up, and so just becoming even mindful in that moment of that. And speaking to that spirit of openness, which I feel like all of you demonstrated, is often what we have to do with clients is, are you open to the possibility that there's something more, and that might reveal to you your purpose better than the mind can. And being willing to face those voices of resistance that really come on strongly very often as well, from your own quiet stillness inside of yourself.
Thank you. I'll end on the word courage. I think purpose discovery, I think classical enlightenment, in a sense, takes courage from the ego to some degree. And so we are inviting the people we're coaching into quite a courageous stand, because you can't think your way through it. It's like shutting your eyes and then falling. That's one of the reasons when I call it the underworld journey. You allow yourself to fall out of your everyday identity into what? So I mentioned I love jazz. Sometimes Louis Armstrong, the great trumpet player, is called the American Bach. And he didn't invent jazz, but oh my God, something came out of him, right? And not everyone liked it, right? The fellow, so I'm speaking my passion, and not everyone's gonna like it. It'll be interesting to see the feedback. I hope you give clear, honest feedback. Some of you will love it, some of you will go, some of you won't. And it's really about being truthful, right? At least if I get all zeros or whatever, I don't know how the thing goes, at least I know I attempted to honestly share the best of what I have. And that's what I invite you to do in your coaching. Be bold, be opinionated, not dogmatic, right? I don't ask you to believe anything I just said. I ask you to experiment for yourself today, Sunday, on your day off, is take some time and dialogue with soul. Go out on a soul walk and ask soul, what is the next thing I should do? What is my purpose? What is my vision? What are my soul core powers? And then listen, right? And practice this a number of times, and then you can bring it to your people because you've practiced it, right? So one, you go out of your comfort zone, out of homeostasis, into wild nature, but frankly, you can do it from bed if you needed to, right? In an urban setting, and then listen with these extra phenomenal capacities and sensitivities, and then give it to your people. Yeah. Thank you. It was wonderful to be with you all today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.